Isn't there something missing though? Because as you describe that, what is missing in South Africa is a civil service.
Yes. Yes.
People who are dedicated to civil service. So when you mention the Auditor General, the fact that he says the things that he does in the way that he does tells us that he's a civil servant. I'm not going to write the hagiography of the public protector who has departed office, Thuli Madonsela, but her work was always that of a public servant. It was within the law, her explanations were always that of public service, administrative oversight. My sense is that the lack of a public service and the institution of cadre deployment meant that there are always political appointments at almost every level. And I'm not certain that a change of party has necessarily shifted that. Because if you have cadre deployment inside the African National Congress government spaces, you have a different kind of cadre deployment inside the spaces that are now governed by the DA. So we don't have a civil service, which was one of the pillars of apartheid. That the state at the larger level could fail spectacularly, but for the person who needs to get a social grant, the white person who needs to get a social grant for their child, in 1985 it worked. And this is Mampili Rampile's statement in Laying the Ghost to Rest, that the civil service development is one of the failures of post-apartheid South Africa. Because then you wouldn't have that problem inside all of those public institutions, because the leadership would do the wacky stuff that leaders always do, but the people throughout the organization would continue to do things.
Sure. Look, the discussion has happened for quite a number of years where people are saying if you look at other countries, there is something called permanent secretary. That doesn't change. It doesn't matter the politician. But we have DGs here who are fired every other day. So the high turnover of the DGs, there's no institutional memory as a result, and this is why we get this kind of frustration. There is somebody at the back there?
Yeah. I've got a question regarding the ratings aspect. When you quantify, because Mail and Guardian has got its own constituency, right? And the majority of the people that voted for the party that's in power, although they might have lost a couple of metros, they still hold the power. When we do the ANC meeting, the number one is still in power. So it should tell us that the majority of the community are happy in the Inverted Commas. So with your paper and the ratings, if we can quantify, if we can reach the masses, and so you can explain as to giving a record of a Z, what does that actually mean for them? So therefore, come election time, they're able to actually be educated in a manner that they can vote adequately. So then you don't sit here, some as if you're bashing, but then if you break it down to such an extent where, okay, we give a Minister of Education and it's a D. This is why we give a D, because you didn't get X amount of information, because SABC is in disrepair, and this is what it means to you. So in this regard, when the paper comes out tomorrow, how is that going to explain to the next person that needs to think of 2019, how it is that should effectively and adequately vote for the regime change that we just talked about?
Sure.
And I think your point is very, very valid, and I think that when we look at the crisis that the media is in, not just in South Africa but worldwide, it speaks to exactly that many of us have lost relevance to the everyday reality of people. And that is the bridge that we have to cross as journalists, as individual journalists, but also as whole newsrooms, as we have to better connect with people. We have to also be able to understand how is the work that we're doing actually connecting with the everyday reality of people, and how are we better equipping people to make better decisions, in a democracy, because ultimately that's what the function of the media is supposed to be. We're supposed to be we're supposed to be that vanguard of democracy. And I think that too often we don't function that when a lot of it is the historical legacy of, being sort of, coming from the white middle class enclaves. But I think that in the process and in the transformation, the processes of transformation that we are currently undergoing, because in South Africa, I firmly believe that the crisis that we're in is not solely related to technological changes. It is also about reassessing the relevance of the media and understanding how we reach more than a traditional suburban audience. Those are exactly the kind of questions that we are grappling with, and that's something that, for example, at the Mail and Guardian we have what we call a review every Friday in the newsroom, where we have everybody, every level of journalists, etc., where we basically take our own paper apart. And that's exactly what comes up consistently is how well are we doing this? That if we're saying, this is what the Guptas have done, this is what we found out about the Guptas this week. How well are we actually explaining that? In that, so if this is, if this, for example, if it is Transnet deal, for example, are we really explaining the effects of that? If there was, misspending on a certain Transnet deal, how is that translated to, a route being cancelled or whatever? Are we actually doing that work? But a lot of it, again, as Angelo pointed out, is that we also face the problem of shrinking newsrooms. So those are some of the balls that we are juggling.
Sure. Prof, I'm going to take this comment, but I do want you to respond to this issue, because sometimes, though, it's about elites talking amongst themselves. So it's like the ANC, NEC fighting amongst themselves. It's just elites. All of them are just elites. Ultimately, and they're more concerned about their interests. So the media versus politicians, it could be about elites. Anyway, let's take that comment. Suppose a more important comment than what I'm saying.
I'd like to, answer a question that Khadija posed, which is the accountability mechanism working?
Yeah.
And ultimately, the role of the media is to inform and to educate the public so that public opinion then shifts towards acting against it. Because, the media isn't a lobby group, right? You guys are not going around trying to depose and pose regime change. It's the role of civil society to do that. And I'd like to point to two indications in the year that the accountability mechanism is working. One is the recent elections. The loss of the metros in a municipal election points towards the public actually being informed about what's happening, and those citizens within those metros making a choice either to not vote, which is also a choice, abstain from elections. And we know that the ANC's traditional base in the metros didn't turn out, which is part of the reason why the ANC poll was lower than other elections. And the second is the stirring of civil society and the actions of civil society in 2016. And I think that, to a certain extent, could give President Zuma maybe 1 point up on the report card, because he's actually single-handedly started reviving civil society, which for 20 years went to sleep with the assumption that, we have a credible and honest and, liberation movement who will never actually go against the legislation that they put in place. And I think for 2016, that's possibly the story, which is civil society possibly trying to remobilize, reorganize, and start speaking up.
Good.
Yes, I agree so much with your points. And I take a softer view on media and accountability. There's not a single newspaper or a single television channel or radio that gets it right all the time and gives the total vision and represents all the civil society communities involved. But as a composite group, I think the media is doing incredibly well in South Africa. And it's really an interface with civil society all the time. If it had not
maybe
been,
not financially.
yeah, true. If it had not been for all the information through various media that comes with civil society, none of this mobilization, conscientization, and action for their rights. That is what the bottom line amounts to. That people are empowered through the media. Who else brings their information? Social, and I include social media and the media. And it is that empowers them to insist that the government does more, to insist that Parliament, they haven't so much mobilized against Parliament, but elections is a form of mobilizing and extracting more accountability from Parliament. And that it's the media that's given the information to insist that it's not just at Parliament, that there's occasional mini Sprague Springs, like we saw in that period when Thabo Mbeki was being ousted, and Parliament was suddenly in their committees, was challenging this and that and that. The last month or three, again, reminded me of that period. Suddenly, there is more courage in those committees in Parliament to hold officials and other politicians to account. But that is not good enough. Parliament, just when the political colours and the direction of political winds are changing, suddenly becoming more accountable again. But in between, look at civil society mobilization. I refer to it, you refer to it. Look at community protests almost year-round. People know that those forms of direct action bring better results. And it is through information, and they get that information through the media.
Sure. Angela,